Welcome, Kellogg community. I'm Michaela Doyle with the Kellogg School of Management. Thank you for joining us today for Conversations with Kellogg Leaders featuring Haruo Naito. In this webinar series, Dean Corneli speaks with Kellogg alumni leaders on timely issues and challenges facing the global business community. You can catch up on prior webinars in this series at our virtual events page on the Kellogg alumni website. We will put a link to that site into the chat now. Today's presentation will last 1 hour, and we invite you to submit questions for our speaker using the Q&A icon that's located at the bottom of your screen. We will address audience questions throughout the conversation. And with that, I'm happy to welcome Dean Francesca Corneli.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you can join us in this event, which is my favorite event. And today we have another incredible speaker that shows, how incredibly successful and what an impact the Kellogg alums have. It is my pleasure, my incredible pleasure today to welcome Haruo Naito, class of 74, who is the representative corporate officer and CEO of Eisai Corporation. We'll be talking about his insights. His company has been really at the forefront of healthcare innovation, oncology, treatment of Alzheimer diseases. And I have to also mention that also Haruo's son is a Kellogg alum with an incredible, therefore, legacy. Haruo, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to a conversation with you.
Thank you. And I have a lot of questions and I'm ready, but I'll remind people, put a question in the chat if you want, and we'll add. Now, let me start with, Eisai really was founded by your grandfather. And we at Kellogg have a long tradition of studying family businesses. And since then, it's been led by your father, then yourself, right? So you have, as a family, a really long-term leadership in areas like Alzheimer disease treatment, oncology, so many important things. Now, how important has this been for you to lead in these areas, which are so important?
Yeah, so the company has founded by my grandfather, but our family owns not so large share of the company anymore. It is a completely public company, and we have a very transparent outside board. Of course, chairman is an outside director, and majority board members are from outside. So company's structure is not anymore private or family owned. But my grandfather and father and myself has been in the position of top leadership over 30 years or so. Why it's happened like that is the one of the topic I may talk. Because I believe the importance of corporate concept or corporate philosophy, which is why we gather in this company and what is the objective we are pursuing through daily business activities. This kind of corporate concept is so important now, to show to the public what kind of existence we are, and for the employees why we are working in this company. And to comprehend or understanding those corporate philosophy at the level of each employees, it take quite a time. Experiences, our corporate concept is a very patient-centric, and we endeavor to understand patients through feelings and try to find out the ways to solve those patients' issues. To understand this corporate concept at each employee's level, it will easily take 10 years or so. So this is one of the reasons why rather long-term leadership is essential for the modern company to realize its corporate concept. This is one. Secondly, innovation, particularly pharmaceutical innovation, sometimes takes easily 15 years or so. So again, we need consistent innovation policies to pursue, and that's why the rather long-term leadership is essential. So those are the reasons of a relatively long-term, leadership in our company. And so, of course, so far, our family members, succeeded this business. But the point is not short-termisms, but the longer views of the management is essential to run the company and directing the way to realize its corporate concepts.
So that's extremely, I'm always amazed that when I hear you talking, but there's so much thought that goes into into your Eisai philosophy. And as you mentioned, right, like as a core of the business, having the R&D, and I know another tenet you have is really achieving social good as a business, right? Which is, by the way, is very Kellogg. So I'm so glad that you're a Kellogg alum. And so how do these R&D and social good come together in your work? Because I was fascinated in finding how much you work on malaria or neglected tropical diseases like filariasis. I hope I pronounce it right. I hear it's also called elephantiasis. How do these things come together? How does your philosophy all come together?
Yeah, social goods, we particularly think about resolving disparities of, healthcare opportunities, and also removing the anxieties regarding health from the people. This is, without any question, good goals for the company to work on for relatively longer period. And during the discussions with the WHO around 15 years ago, we found there are huge unmet needs in the area of tropical diseases, particularly so-called neglected tropical disease, which just those people who suffered had been neglected from any of the world interests, and the disease staying there with a dreadful situation. And we talked with the WHO what we can do, and they said lymphatic filariasis, which is a mosquito-caused infectious disease, like your legs and arms look like elephants, a very dreadful disease and the targets of discrimination. The fundamental drug is just out of stock. Nobody likes to produce it due to the economic reason. So I think this is the area which we could work on, and it just fits to realize our own corporate concept. So that's what we started. But the price we set for this drug called DEC tablets, DHL carbamazine tablets, one of the three essential drugs to treat filariasis. We set the price zero. So
Wow.
yeah, and we've produced already more than 2.5 billion tablets and distributed to 32 endemic countries already. But the financial revenue is ultimately zero. So, but we define it's not the donation or not the philanthropic activities, but it's a true business of ours. So we continue this business until we successfully eliminate the disease from this world. And why we are doing that? We explain it fully to our shareholders through various occasions, including the general shareholders meeting, and get their support. And amazingly, majority of the shareholders are supporting this quite, substantially. Eisai, please continue this. This is what we want to see. The impacts of this price zero business has been enormous because some countries elimination of the disease completed. Some countries, the quality of life gets better. So we need some way to calculate this impact in not regular, accounting method. So something called impact, based accounting method. These days, some companies are trying to adopt this method. It's of course not exactly the same as the regular accounting method. So you cannot integrate this impact accounting method integrating to the traditional ones completely, but you present those impact accounting results simultaneously with the regular accounting methods. And you see the impact of those neglected tropical disease patients recovering to productive areas again, or removing their anxiety is just enormous. And we can show that in monetary terms these days. So that is one of the effects of those price zero business. The other one is, everybody is now looking at the future market potential of so-called global South. Africa, Latin America, some of the, Southern Pacific island nations, and those areas are all, endemic countries of those diseases. And so-called global health ecosystem is there, and major players so far is WHO or Gates Foundations, Wellcome Foundations, and of course the pandemic governments and some of the pharmaceutical companies or diagnostic companies. And we are now one of the core members of this ecosystem. So this is a great asset for us to further make commercial entries to those global South, so-called, and people already known about our company, and they trust us. So this is a great intangible asset for future, expanding our business in those global South areas. So those are some, returns or benefits that we are observing from this price zero business. And we are very encouraged with these activities.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that cooperation with, you mentioned the WHO, the Gates Foundation, and it helps you achieve many more people in the developing countries in that way?
Yeah, that's right. We are seeing there are over 20 those neglected tropical diseases. So there are enormous, rooms or the areas we further need to tackle on. And major ways business model for that is so-called public-private partnership.
Yeah.
This public-private partnership model has been resolving many of those social issues. And some of the advancing industry joining this PPP, many cutting-edge technology companies such as drone or remote diagnostics. Those companies are joining. So it's in fact very modern, kind of ecosystem now deploying to solve this neglected tropical disease areas.
So that's amazing, and we are looking forward to see more that what you will do in this private-public partnership. But let me ask you one thing, because I wanted to ask you also, because this is so important in healthcare and coming from an academia care. What is the role of academic research that plays for you, right? And I know you have in particular, you worked with a geneticist, Sir John Hardy at University College London. How does this come around, and what role it plays, and how important is it for you?
So modern pharmaceutical discovery is all based on human biology. And what that means is we are starting discovery works based on our samples, for example, liquid samples or tissues. And those samples, of course, carrying on valuable information of ourselves, such as relating to genetics, genomes, and various so-called biomarkers representing your, health conditions.
Yes.
Those biomarkers or genomes are moving according to the stages of the diseases, cancers or Alzheimer's. All of those disease has stages of the seriousness developments. So this kind of human biological information based on human samples is the very start of discovery work. And the very simple question: who has those samples? And in many cases, it's not the industry. It is academia or research institutions. They are having, valuable samples, and they are doing the fundamental analysis using those samples. So inevitably, we need to collaborate with academia for discovery work. And the great academician like John Hardy, who is, developed the Alzheimer's, why Alzheimer's causing the brain diseases in 1990s for the first time in the world. Great scientists, and why those scientists also like to work with us. Because they like to see their hypothesis is true or not.
Yes.
And only way to prove their disease hypothesis is true or not is by treating the patients and actually patients get better by the drug based on their hypothesis. That is a great kind of goal that their academic work is actually having social contributions. And basic motivation of those basic academicians, yet true. They like to see if it works truly to the patients, and that is the proof of their hypothesis. I believe that is the fundamental motivation for great scientists like John Hardy, just a genius, likes to collaborate with the industry, like ourselves.
Well, as an academic, you are right. There's nothing that makes happier an academic that actually see that their invention is having an impact. But talking about impact, I understand people in the industry talk about the so-called undruggable protein targets involved in cancer. Can you tell us a bit more? Because I don't know about, I need to understand more. I'm curious. Yes.
Yeah, there are some molecules in the human body or some interactions such as protein-protein interactions, which is usually drug substance cannot reach by several reasons, such as the surface of the molecule is very slippery. There is no holes or nothing the drug substance can be attaching to those molecules. Or there are interactions between protein and protein, which is so, deep inside the cell, so the regular drug cannot reach. And when we get into the causal relationship of the cancers or any diseases, there are such, obstacles exist. So this is so-called undruggable targets. And there are several of those known undruggable targets. So we know those undruggable targets sometimes real cause of the disease or disease progression, yet the drug treatment cannot, tackle on that. So there are huge technology developments to resolve this undruggable turn to druggable targets. This is amazing new areas which many of life scientists or industry is now working on, and we are working on too. Many new technologies are arriving up by startups, bio ventures again. Amazing. Not from the large established companies, but rather from relatively small, less than 50 scientists working type of startups or new ventures. They have such kind of very high technologies to make undruggable targets to druggable targets. So that includes the new modalities, such as regular antibody or regular small molecule substance that cannot have affinity to the molecular target, but such as peptides. It is a relatively mid-sized molecule, but those peptides can enter the inside the cell and reach to the target. Many new inventions are arising in, such as the one, our brain is highly protected from any foreign substances entering to the brain by so-called blood-brain barrier, which is existing in our brain vessels. So the regular drug, even targeting the brain, only less than 1% of the substances can reach into the brain, hijacking some of the mechanism of that blood-brain barrier, and using that, moving in the brain very large amount of active substances into the brain, and that would be again dramatically change the effectiveness of the some of the difficult neurological disease treatments. So those modern advancements is a very unique and completely new, and open up tremendous opportunities to make the currently curable disease to curable, maybe within a 5-10 years range.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, exactly, right. That is a kind of true mission of this life science industry doing, and I hope we get more understandings of the nature of our industry.
Well, you're definitely fascinating everybody, because I see a lot of questions coming in. Let me ask you what, before saying one, there is also a hello from Daryl Ellis, also Kellogg class of 1974. So your classmate say, good to learn of your accomplishment. Thanks for sharing with us. So it's a great way to connect, doing it in this,
Exactly.
in this way. Yes. Now, there's another question here which says, you mentioned intangible assets. What are other unexpected assets that contribute to your success, for example, in Alzheimer's breakthrough? So what makes you so successful? It's true, in an area which has been so difficult.
Yeah. So key is the patients. We've been trying to understand the patients' true feelings, particularly Alzheimer's patients and families, what they are pleased, what they got angry, what they feel sadness, and how they, have enjoyable, events. And we found that those patients' true feelings are so-called tacit knowledge. Usually they don't speak out, they don't write. Those true feelings are just remaining in their bottom of hearts and stay there. And only way to understand and knowing those of their true feelings is being together, spending time with them, or sharing some of the, regular experiences, such as, doing right things together, or having meals, those things. So we encourage our people to spend 1% of the business time for the purposes, going to the patients' places or their gatherings, and just stay there. Something like try to chatting or try to some light things together. And we recommend, about 2.5 days a year, spending a business time for this kind of purposes. Then we understand Alzheimer's patients what their feelings is as their tacit knowledge. And then we externalize those tacit knowledge to explicit knowledge and sharing by the group, and try to find out how we can solve or remove their anxieties by our own business conducts. Doing this for over 10 years or 20 years, we are in the situation like we share the patient's past history in general. and we are in an empathy situation with them. So their values and their priorities are our values and priorities. Then what's happening is seeing the same future as patients and the families like to see. And that is Alzheimer's disease could be manageable and curable. Like that, we continue our Alzheimer's activities or research for over 30 years easily. Without having this kind of activities, socializing with the patients, we cannot continue Alzheimer's research and various activities in Alzheimer's disease areas for such a long time. So this is one of the backside reasons of the continuity, sustainability of the business strategies or directions.
So interesting, and I always love to hear the Kellogg culture when I hear you talking about how you think in the long term and empathy with the patients. It's amazing. Now, let me ask you one thing, because that's what I get asked all the time in general, right? The rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning are really changing so many areas. What does it look like from the pharmaceutical industry point of view? How impactful will they be in the discovery and delivery of new drugs?
Yeah, very simple benefits of this is the clinical studies. So at the very end of drug development, we need to try the drug to target population. And this is the most toughest part of our business. We need a lot of resources. For example, one Alzheimer's disease final pivotal clinical studies, we need to have the patients entry, something like 2,000 patients entry, and it's cost $1 billion to conduct one study. But these days, there are a lot of failed studies, so-called, including our competitors' failed study, our own failed study, our own success study. And the amount of data is enormous because one patient, we have almost 10,000 data of their biomarkers and their conditions of health. So it's a real huge amount of the data, like flying a space shuttle or something like that. Similar number of data is available for analyze. And so if machine learning or AI technologies to analyze those past data, including success and failure, you may have very high predictability of the next clinical trials. Sometimes, you may not need next clinical trials. Based on the past analysis, the drug profile, which is clear now like this, is definitely having this kind of results by this kind of clinical trials with, let's say, 95% confidence. Then we may, shorten the clinical development period substantially or make reducing the patient population substantially, saving a lot of time and saving a lot of resources, investments into the clinical trials, and much earlier development could be possible. That means a new drug can be available to patients substantially in a short time. So currently, the clinical development will easily take 7-8 years from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But once we, apply AI technologies, very smartful, it may be half of that period.
Wow.
That is a great, advantage due to AI technologies. And, back to the discovery works, we talk about make undruggable targets druggable. Again, AI is greatly helpful because there are huge data exists to analyze, and it just cannot do it by the regular calculation method, and AI technologies will be greatly advantageous to apply based on the huge amount of the past data, including failed one and successful one. So in the past, enormous results of failed ones are just waste. But these days, it's a fortune, those failed data is still revived as the valuable data to as the targets of analyzing for AI.
That's a very interesting insight. And I see here a very related question. It says actually, Naito-san, this is JP Millon, MBA 76. It was a pleasure to work with you in the 90s when I was president of Eli Lilly Japan. So you see a lot of people reaching out to you. And it's a quick question. It says, what is your view of AI-enhanced techniques to get new molecules?
Yeah, that's again very positive. For example, we are talking about or new technologies to entering the brain by hijacking physiological existing mechanisms, such as taking to the ion Fe into the brain. We need to analyze more than 50 billion candidates of substances, and it's just enormous, amounts data, and nobody except AI can do that, and we need to do it repeatedly. So this is not some of the continuity. It's a really quantum leap. Completely different areas of research is now opened by AI technologies.
Very interesting. And here there's another question about more mature pipeline candidates and marketed drugs. And the question is, what should the FDA or other regulatory bodies prioritize to better regulate mental health innovation, including Alzheimer's treatment like Leqembi? Data collection, what helps most? Data collection innovation, coordination among agencies, guidance for industries. What do you think?
Right. The regulatory agencies, of course, they are responsible for people's health, particularly safety. The drug should be safe enough to apply for a large number of the people. That is of course, FDA major concern. So safety is very important. And to check the safety, you need relatively usually large studies. So that's we understand. But again, with regard to safety areas, application of AI complete analysis of the past safety information. We may talk with the agency that the safety level of these new chemical entities or new antibodies is foreseeably like this, so that this kind of clinical protocol could be acceptable or not. So this is one way we are discussing with the agencies at this moment. And also these days, many agencies are adopting so-called accelerated approval. That means a conditional approval. So we understand, for example, many cancer areas, they accept the data filing with the early, clinical data, and temporarily approve the drug usage. However, later time they like to fulfilling those packages by relatively comprehensive study in the later time. So this kind of accelerated approval or early approval, option should be more widely usage for particularly for the difficult diseases, which the patients, desperately wait for the new treatments.
Well, I hope people will listen to you. But I actually see another question here, which is very related to a question I wanted to ask you myself, which is, what excites you about the many venture capital funded biopharma startups working on drug discovery and early drug development? What do you see at the horizon that excites you?
Yeah, that just a very exciting areas. Of course, I like to see our industry colleagues regularly at the conferences. That's a good, exchange of opinions, but stimuli which I'm receiving is enormously large with those startup people or venture people. Their perspectives or way to looking at the things is very different from traditional industry people. That includes sciences or business conduct itself. So it always amazingly, encouraging and stimulus to talk with those peoples. And these days, it's kind of borderless. For example, of course, U.S., Europe, major, those startups people are rising up every time, but including China, those or Israel, or Iceland, for example. Those countries, many startups, technology basis or biological basis, are rising up almost every time. And it's really interesting to discuss with them, seeing them, how they look at things. It's amazingly interesting and stimulus.
It's amazing. And let me ask you, because of course, what you have achieved in the area of Alzheimer's disease is amazing. And you have said in the past that you believe that we will find a cure for Alzheimer's disease, which is so important. Now, I had heard it was so difficult. So what have you learned over your years developing Leqembi, your new Alzheimer's treatment, that brings you such optimism, right? Because it's been looked like impossible for so many years.
Yeah. So again, back to Sir John Hardy.
Yes.
And John started saying Alzheimer's disease is causing so-called A-beta proteins in the brain. And the A-beta proteins cascade is like that, starting from small monomer down to the large insoluble, plaque in the brain, and the position of this A-beta protein causing the disease. And by Leqembi, we prove this. Actually, removing those A-beta proteins from the brain, people's progression being delayed, and some of the symptoms has been improved by this treatment. So I believe John is very happy with this because his hypothesis is proved true. But that, again, we found not solve all issues of the Alzheimer's disease. It's called multiple pathological disease. So A-beta protein is one of the main causes, but it's not all. There are remaining causes, such as another protein called tau, T-A-U. So now the kind of open space for how we're going to remove or stop spreading this protein in the brain is the current target. And we have good candidates to, stop, spreading tau in the brain agents. So probably in a few years, we have the treatments both for A-beta protein and tau protein. That would be solve two major causes of the Alzheimer's disease. So this is one hope. The other one is we found early start of the treatments would be make difference. Tremendous effective size enlargements are observed if you find something wrong and start treating earlier. Currently, starting period is called mild cognitive impairments. Which is the, people feel some frequent forgetfulness or, something, some difficulties which they used to be done, such as, going to shopping and pay those things, some difficulties. That is the start of observation. And you go to the neurologist and check by A-beta confirmation test and found A-beta deposition there. So that stage treatment is earliest points, and it is great. But there are one stage earlier than that called preclinical AD stage, which is people's cognitive function is normal, but once you test, the protein deposition has been starting. It is probably 4 or 5 years before that the current starting points. We have trial for that. So that is another, interesting point of the improvements of Alzheimer's treatments.
It's so inspirational, exactly the impact, and it's really amazing. But we are quickly running out of time, and I want to ask you a couple of questions about Kellogg, because you joined Eisai the year after you graduated Kellogg, just after, right, 1974. And in the past, I heard you describing Kellogg like a boot camp for a young person who wants to lead in business. So I wanted to ask you, how did attending Kellogg change your view of yourself, or what you could accomplish? What influence had?
Yeah, these days young people enjoying the life in the various ways. But, is there any discipline disciplined experiences during young days or not is particularly important. That means there are a lot of mandatory things you need to fitting or performing for a certain period of time. And like U.S. Marine Corps boots camp is like that. Sometimes your freedom is completely constrained. You have no free time. Keep on doing things which is a set force with enormous, powers. That kind of experiences may be good for your future career. And early 1970s for foreigners, U.S. MBA program is one of the life like that. You need to learn in a completely different language, and you stay in different places, which is sometimes very cold, and living in the dormitory, eating the food at the dormitory again. I go to classroom, library. That's it, kind of a simple but yet disciplined life is invaluable experiences, at least for me that time. So Kellogg was like that experiences for me. And the colleagues which spent time together in that kind of living lifestyle is truly the kind of people sharing some important things in the life. So that's why Kellogg graduates, alumni are so cohesive, tighting together, and always exchange each other.
Absolutely. And I love that you describe some characteristic of the life at Kellogg, which is exactly what happened now, right? And it shows the continuity. I have here a question that says, Naito-san, what is your favorite memory from your experience at Kellogg?
First year was just dreadful and terrible year. But second year, all of a sudden, space is open to me, and the class turns to be an enjoyable thing. I don't know why, but after first year's really fundamental kind of disciplinary courses, second year you are experienced or accustomed to that, and particularly I was measuring marketing, and marketing is truly fun for me. So I can pick up many marketing courses, including Philip Kotler's, truly marketing guru. Even at the time, enjoying the communication with him, for example. So second year was like a heaven. First year is like hell, but second year was like a heaven. So that's my experiences.
Yeah, I see. So our students today, I don't know if they define the first year by hell, but everybody loves the second year when they can really explore our elective. Let me ask you just to finish, because we are getting towards the end. So, okay, so you joined Eisai in 74, just after Kellogg, you had an influence, and now you had so many years at the helm of this company moving forward. You've been an incredible leader. How has Kellogg, if you think of you today, right? How is I hope Kellogg is still influencing what kind of leader you are, right? And if it does, how does it?
Yeah. So, Kellogg has a lot of foreign affiliates, programs or schools these days. And regularly, those groups visiting us. Recently, we got a German group visiting us. Their, MBA program, some 20 MBA students visiting us every year. And we discuss around 2-3 hours of the current issues. So it is not just Kellogg in Evanston. Kellogg Networks is elsewhere spreading, and all of those constituencies are Kellogg, and we share basic things about Kellogg spirits, which is truly we are problem solving, not escaping from any of the current hardships. Those spirits are, I believe, Kellogg spirits, not just disciplinary excellence. And sharing those spirits, all of the members of various parts of the world of Kellogg affiliates. That's something I'm enjoying very much. And that's something I truly appreciate your leadership of the dean of the Kellogg Core School.
Well, thank you so much. And, it's great to have your support, because I have to say, and this has been an hour, it flew away. So interesting, your vision and your knowledge and your thoughtfulness in all the aspects is really, Naito-san, so amazing. We are so proud to have you as an alum. And I know you and all our alums in Japan are the most passionate and supportive. So thank you for all you're doing in Japan. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to showcase, someone like you who is making such an impact on the world. We are so privileged. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity. I enjoyed very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Bye. Thank you.